Did you think gladiators were just arena fighters? What if I told you they were much more than that? Far beyond the bloodshed and the roars of the crowd, gladiators carried a symbolic, political, and cultural function that went beyond mere entertainment. They weren't soldiers of the Roman Empire, but neither were they just slaves condemned to death. They were public figures, icons of resistance, instruments of social control, and, in many cases, celebrities of ancient Rome. What you're about to discover may surprise you. While Roman soldiers marched under orders, protecting borders and expanding territories, gladiators fought for survival and glory within monumental arenas like the Colosseum. Have you ever experienced this? The feeling of being watched, judged, tested, as if your every move were part of a spectacle? For gladiators, this was literal. Each combat was a performance, a narrative enacted before thousands of eyes, where physical strength blended with strategy, theatricality, and emotional tension. And even though they were trained to kill, many of them became symbols of honor, courage, and even freedom. Stay with me until the end, because understanding the difference between gladiators and soldiers is to delve into a universe where combat wasn't just war. It was art, it was politics, it was spectacle. Soldiers represented the power of the state, order, and military discipline. Gladiators, on the other hand, represented controlled chaos, human instinct, the struggle for survival in its rawest form. And it is precisely this duality that made them such fascinating figures. While soldiers were respected for their strategic role, gladiators were adored for their public presence, for their ability to move and provoke. Roman culture transformed these warriors into almost mythological figures. Some had names known throughout the city, plastered in graffiti, sung in poems, revered as heroes. And even though they were often prisoners or slaves, they had something. Not all soldiers had: fame. The arena was a stage where it was decided not only who lived or died, but who would be remembered. And this memory, this legacy, has spanned centuries and has come down to us as a symbol of strength, resistance, and spectacle. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because understanding who these gladiators really were, how they lived, trained, and became legends, is essential to seeing the Roman Empire from an angle that few know. And when we begin to see gladiators not just as fighters, but as living symbols of a culture that blended power, spectacle, and survival, everything changes. The image that has remained etched in history isn't just one of blood and sand. It's one of resistance, strategy, and presence. And perhaps as you look at these warriors of the Roman Empire, you'll also realize there's something about them that resonates with our own quest for recognition, for self-improvement, for freedom. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below with what's touched you most so far. It could be a phrase, a feeling, or something curious that arose. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this kind of content that provokes reflection and connection. By the way, if this video brought you a new perspective or made you see gladiators from a different perspective, please leave a like. This helps keep this exchange alive and shows that this kind of conversation is valuable to you. And if you feel like continuing to explore the behind the scenes of ancient Rome, subscribe to the channel here. This way you can stay tuned for future videos and join me on this journey through stories that go far beyond the books. Stories that still resonate, that still inspire, that still challenge us to look deeper. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because understanding how the brutal training in gladiator schools worked can reveal a lot about what these men faced before they even stepped into the arena. The gladiators who marked the history of Rome were not all the same, much less mere disposable pieces in a bloody game. The hidden truth behind the arenas is that these fighters came from diverse backgrounds and carried stories that went far beyond violence. Many were prisoners of war, captured in battle and sent to the ludi, gladiator schools, as punishment or bargaining chips. Others were slaves, sold or offered by their owners, forced to fight to entertain the Roman elite. But what few realize is that there were also volunteers, free men who, of their own free will, signed up to become gladiators. And as strange as it may seem, some sought fame, money, or even redemption. This choice, however radical, revealed much about the mentality of the time. In a society where spectacle was a form of power, Entering the arena was also a way to distinguish oneself. Some nobles, in moments of crisis or a desire for recognition, threw themselves into this brutal world to prove their courage or win the favor of the people. And even among the slaves, there were those who, by excelling in combat, earned respect, privileges, and, in rare cases, freedom. It was a journey of transformation, where the body became an instrument of survival and the name, a mark that could cross the walls of the arena. Behind the scenes of this system, a complex structure existed. Gladiators were intensely trained, receiving controlled nutrition, medical care, and tactical instruction. They weren't just brutes thrown together at random. They were athletes prepared to stage combats that blended technique, strength, and narrative. Each type of gladiator had their own style, a role within the spectacle, and this made the audience emotionally involved, cheering, vibrating, and suffering. It was like watching a play where the outcome could be death, and where every gesture carried meaning. This duality between pain and glory, between submission and fame, is what makes gladiators such fascinating figures. They were not obedient soldiers of the empire, but neither were they mere victims. They were men who, by choice or fate, became part of a system that transformed them into legends. And this transformation didn't just happen in the arena. It happened in the way they were seen, remembered, feared, and admired. The impact they had went beyond combat. They were a presence that stirred the collective imagination, the emotions of the crowd, political decisions, and even the values of Roman society. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because understanding how the brutal training in gladiatorial schools worked can reveal a lot about what these men faced before they even stepped into the arena, and how this preparation shaped not only the bodies, but also the minds and spirits of these spectacle warriors. Comment here. That makes sense to me. If this part made you see gladiators as much more complex characters than history usually shows. While Roman soldiers marched under the empire's banner, obeying orders and defending borders, gladiators operated under a completely different logic. They fought not for Rome, but for survival, for glory, and in some cases, for freedom. This difference in purpose shaped everything. From training to the status each occupied in society, the soldier was part of a military machine, disciplined, hierarchical, with strategic functions and political obligations. The gladiator, on the other hand, was a spectacle, trained to enchant, provoke, and thrill. This created a profound separation between the two worlds, even though both shared the realm of violence. Behind the scenes of this structure, soldiers' training focused on endurance, group formation, war tactics, and obedience. They learned to fight in formation, to protect the empire, and to maintain order. Gladiators, on the other hand, were trained for individual combat, for a duel that needed to be not only effective, but also visually striking. Every movement was rehearsed, every blow carried scenic intent. It was a performance of life and death, where the audience expected not only blood, but also narrative, and this required a completely different mindset. The soldier needed to nullify himself in the name of the collective. The gladiator needed to stand out for the audience. This difference was also reflected in social status. The soldier, even though part of the army, commanded institutional respect. He was seen as a defender of the homeland, as the armed wing of power. The gladiator, however, even though he was often a slave or prisoner, could achieve fame that went beyond the arena. Some became so popular that they influenced political decisions, inspired works of art, and were revered as true icons. It was a curious inversion. The marginalized who, upon entering the arena, won the hearts of the people. And this conquest came not through titles, but through impact, through presence, through courage. Freedom was also experienced differently. The soldier had rights but was bound by hierarchy. The gladiator had no rights but could conquer freedom with the strength of his own body. It was a journey of overcoming, where each fight could be the last, or the one that would change everything. And this constant tension created an emotional depth that soldiers didn't experience in the same way. The gladiator knew that each fight was a chance for transformation, and this awareness shaped his posture, his dedication, his relationship with his own destiny. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because understanding how the brutal training in gladiator schools worked reveals not only the physical preparation of these men, but also the mental and symbolic construction that made them true warriors of the spectacle. Comment here. That makes sense to me. If this part made you see how the purpose and context completely change the essence of these two types of fighters. Training in gladiator schools, known as gladiatorial games, was more than physical preparation. It was a true reprogramming of the mind and body for survival. These men weren't just taught to fight. They were molded to face death head-on, day after day, as an inevitable part of their routine. The discipline was rigid, almost cruel. They woke early, trained to exhaustion, with repetitive sessions of hand-to-hand combat, weapons handling, and duel simulations. Every movement had to be precise, every reaction calculated. There was no room for hesitation. They trained to kill, or be killed. The hidden truth behind these schools is that the training was not just technical, but psychological. Gladiators were exposed to situations of extreme stress, where fear was used as a tool of control and empowerment. The instructors, many of them former gladiators, knew that real combat required more than strength. It required composure, strategy, and emotional mastery. It was a journey of transformation, where the survival instinct was refined until it became almost an art. And this art was displayed before crowds who wanted not just to see blood, but also spectacle. The impact of each blow, the posture of each warrior, the drama of the confrontation, all were part of a precisely staged narrative. Behind the scenes at these schools, there was also a rudimentary but functional medical structure. Gladiators were valuable, and so they received care that many ordinary citizens lacked. Wounds were treated with herbs, compresses, and techniques that blended medicine and superstition. Recovery was accelerated, not out of compassion, but out of necessity. A frozen gladiator was a frozen investment, and this made the environment even more tense. Every day was a test, every training session a battle anticipated, every glance a silent reading of who might be the next to fall. Their diet was controlled, focused on gaining muscle mass and endurance. Many ate a diet rich in carbohydrates and vegetables, with little meat, which surprises those who imagine these men as voracious carnivores. The goal was to keep the body strong, yet agile, and this physical preparation was accompanied by repetitive exercises, where the body learned to react automatically. Technique was everything. One mistake could cost one's life, and so gladiators became obsessed with their movements, with reading their opponent, with anticipating the attack. It was a deadly dance, where every step could be their last. Most impressively, even in the face of such brutality, many gladiators developed a kind of silent respect for one another. It wasn't friendship, it was recognition. They knew they were all on the same journey, facing the same fears, carrying the same burden. And this bond, however subtle, created an atmosphere of honor within the chaos. They weren't fighting just for themselves. They fought for an identity that, even if imposed, was lived intensely. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because understanding how the arena was transformed into a stage of glory, and death reveals the true impact these fights had, not only on the gladiators, but on all of Roman society. Comment here. I'm on this journey too. If this part made you see that gladiatorial training was preparation for much more than combat, it was a way to survive one's own destiny. The Colosseum wasn't just a monumental building, it was a living symbol of the Roman mentality, a stage where glory and death met in every combat. There, under the gaze of thousands of spectators, gladiators ceased to be mere men trained to fight and became legends. The grand architecture, the underground corridors, the gates that opened to reveal the next duel, everything was designed to evoke impact, emotion, and reverence. And when the gladiator stepped onto that sand-covered floor, he knew he wasn't just fighting for survival. He was fighting for memory, for legacy, for a place in history. The arena was more than a physical space. It was an energetic field charged with expectation, tension, and collective desire. The audience did not watch passively. They cheered, shouted, and decided. A gesture from the emperor, a signal from the crowd, and a man's fate could be sealed. This direct interaction between spectacle and decision made each combat a unique experience. And the gladiators, aware of this, learned to master not only technique, but also presence. They knew that the way they moved, how they reacted, how they faced danger could determine Not only the outcome of the fight, but also the impact it would have on the hearts and minds of those watching. The hidden truth is that many gladiators understood the arena as a ritual, a space where death was possible, but where transformation was inevitable. Each entrance was a crossing, each combat a revelation, and this revelation wasn't just for the audience, it was for the warrior himself. It was there that he discovered the limits of his body, the strength of his mind, the depth of his soul. It was there that he became more than a fighter. He became a symbol, an icon, a reference, and this impact reverberated beyond the stands. It inspired artists, influenced political decisions, and shaped culture. Behind the scenes at the Colosseum, there was precise organization. The fights were planned, the pairs chosen carefully, the styles contrasted to create narrative tension. It wasn't just about who would win, it was about how they would win, about the drama, the suspense, the surrender. And the gladiators knew this. Some developed characters, striking gestures, ways of fighting that became recognizable. It was a construction of identity within the chaos. And this identity, when well sustained, could elevate a man to mythical status. The arena was also a space for decisions. And these decisions weren't just about life or death. They were about values, about what Rome wanted to show the world, about what the people wanted to feel. The emperor, by raising or lowering his thumb, wasn't just deciding a gladiator's fate. He was communicating something. He was reaffirming power, justice, or even mercy. And the audience, in reacting, also expressed their desires, their frustrations, their passions. It was a collective theater, where every gesture carried weight, where every emotion was amplified. The impact of these combats went beyond the moment. Many gladiators, having survived multiple fights, became public figures. They were invited to events, portrayed in mosaics mentioned in poems. Some had followers, admirers, even imitators. And this shows how the arena was not just a space of violence, it was a space of symbolic construction, of narrative, of influence. Gladiators became mirrors of society, reflections of its fears, desires, and ideals. And this emotional connection is what made them unforgettable. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because understanding how the fame and cult of gladiators spread through the streets of Rome can reveal a lot about the power of image, presence, and memory in the construction of icons that span centuries. Comment here. That makes sense to me. If this part made you see that the arena was much more than a battlefield, it was a stage where ordinary men became eternal. They were the influencers of ancient Rome, and that's no exaggeration. Some gladiators achieved a level of fame that transcended the arena and permeated the streets, homes, and conversations of the people. Their names were written on walls, chanted in popular songs, and emblazoned on everyday objects. They were admired by children, revered by women, envied by free men. And all this happened at a time when fame didn't depend on followers, but on impact, on presence, on a strength that transcended combat and became a symbol of something greater. The hidden truth is that many of these gladiators constructed a public identity with strategic precision. They chose striking gestures, provocative phrases, and fighting styles that became recognizable. And this construction wasn't just spontaneous, it was a decision, a way to stand out in a world where death was constant, but memory could be eternal. Some even had nicknames that became trademarks. Others inspired plays, sculptures, and even passing fashions. And this shows how the arena wasn't just a space of violence, it was a stage of influence. Behind the scenes of this fame, there was also a network of vested interests. Gladiator school owners promoted their fighters as true stars. They organized events, created rivalries, and fueled narratives that captured the public's attention. It was a kind of primitive but effective marketing, and gladiators who knew how to play this game reaped rare benefits, better accommodations, special meals, even political protection. Fame in this context was a powerful currency, and those who knew how to use it could transform their journey of pain into a path of ascension. The impact of this popularity was so strong that in some cases gladiators influenced Senate decisions, sparked public debate, and even changed the behavior of the elite. Some considered them dangerous because of the power they accumulated outside the arena, and others idolized them as examples of courage, endurance, and resilience. This duality made the gladiator's figure even more complex. He wasn't just a warrior, he was a social phenomenon, a reflection of Rome's tensions, desires, and contradictions. The mentality behind this image, cult reveals much about Roman society. The people sought heroes who came not from the nobility, but from the sand, men who faced the impossible and still rose, who bled in front of everyone yet maintained their composure, who faced death with dignity and therefore became immortal in the collective memory. It was a form of symbolic transformation, where suffering became strength and public exposure became a tool of transcendence. This journey to fame was not accessible to everyone. Many gladiators died nameless, without history, without memory. But those who managed to cross the line between anonymity and recognition left deep marks. And these marks did not fade with time. They spread, multiplied, reinvented themselves. And that is why, to this day, the figure of the gladiator lives on, not only in books but in culture, in art, in the imagination. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because understanding the different combat styles and weapons used by each type of gladiator can reveal how technique and visual narrative were fundamental to constructing this image of power and fascination. Comment here, I'm on this journey too. If this part made you see that gladiators weren't just fighters, they were characters who shaped culture with every step in the arena. Each gladiator who stepped into the arena carried not only a weapon, but also a visual and strategic identity that made him unique in the eyes of the crowd. And this was no accident. Combat styles were carefully defined, almost like characters in an epic narrative, where each type of gladiator represented a strength, a weakness, a story. The murmillo, for example, was the heavy warrior, equipped with a large rectangular shield and a short gladius. His closed helmet with a fish crest gave him an imposing, almost impenetrable appearance. He advanced with force, dominating the space, and his presence created a sense of constant threat. He was the tank of the arena, the symbol of resistance. On the other hand, the retiarius was the opposite in almost every way. Light, agile, helmetless, armed with a net and a trident. His strategy was based on speed, intelligence, and provocation. He didn't face his enemy head-on. He tired them out, confused them, and destabilized them. And when he managed to ensnare his opponent with the net, the audience cheered. It was like watching a tense dance between predator and prey, where the weaker, with cunning, could overcome the stronger. This duality between brute strength and refined skill created a narrative tension that kept everyone engaged, breathing along with every movement. The Thrax, in turn, was known for his curved sword and small shield. His fighting style was aggressive, fast, and full of unexpected cuts. He represented the rebellious warrior, the fighter who came from the provinces and brought with him an almost savage fury. His helmet with a high crest and narrow visor gave him a ferocious appearance, and his constant movement made the combat unpredictable. He was the kind of gladiator who set the arena ablaze with his energy, his dedication, and his intensity. There was also the hoplomachus, who imitated Greek soldiers with a spear, round shield, and more complete armor. His style was more technical, more calculated, and he often faced the murmillo in duels reminiscent of historical battles. And each combination of styles created a different narrative. The audience wasn't just watching a fight, they were watching a plot, a story told through blows, dodges, and gestures. And the gladiators, aware of this, learned to use their styles as a language, as a way to communicate with the audience, to provoke emotions, to leave a mark. This visual and strategic construction was an essential part of the spectacle. And more than that, it was a form of survival. Because the gladiator who knew how to stand out, who knew how to create a connection with the audience, had a better chance of being spared, of being remembered, of being elevated. It was a decision that went beyond technique. It was a choice of identity. And this choice shaped not only the combat, but the impact it caused. It was a journey of transformation, where each weapon, each armor, each style, was an extension of the warrior's soul. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because understanding the code of honor and the unspoken rules that existed among gladiators can reveal how, even within the brutality, there was room for respect, strategy, and decisions that went far beyond physical strength. Comment here. That makes sense to me. If this part made you see that each combat style was a living narrative, and that gladiators fought not just with weapons, but with presence and intention, even amidst the brutality of the arena, there was a silent code that guided the gladiators, a kind of unwritten ethic built on pain, courage, and a constant embrace of risk. It wasn't just about winning. It was about how you fought, how you fell, how you faced the end. And this code of honor, however invisible, shaped the way the fights unfolded and how the gladiators were perceived. There were gestures that communicated respect, movements that begged for mercy, looks that revealed more than words. And all of this took place before an audience that not only watched, but also decided. The hidden truth is that, often, a gladiator's life or death depended not on his skill, but on the audience's reaction. A warrior who fought bravely, who demonstrated technique, who thrilled the crowd, could be spared even after defeat. A single gesture was enough, the raising of a finger, the collective cry, the cheering of the people. And this shared power between the emperor and the audience created an emotional tension that made each fight unpredictable. The gladiator knew that winning wasn't enough. He had to conquer. He had to make an impact. Behind the scenes of this dynamic, there were unspoken rules that everyone learned over time. A gladiator who fell honorably, who didn't beg, who accepted his fate with dignity, was more respected. And this respect could be the difference between death and survival. The gesture of mercy, the famous missio, was granted when the defeated demonstrated valor. And this valor wasn't just physical, it was vibrational. It was the energy he transmitted, the posture he maintained, the dedication he demonstrated. It was a decision that involved mindset, presence, and impact. This relationship between combat and honor created a unique atmosphere. Gladiators weren't just fighters. They were interpreters of a narrative where every choice carried weight. Choosing to fight to the end, even against all odds, could be seen as noble. Choosing to retreat strategically, as a way to preserve one's life and style, was also respected. And this freedom within the rigidity of the arena made the arena a space for expression, a place where the warrior could show who he was, even in the face of death. The emperor, seated in a prominent position, held ultimate power. His gesture could seal a man's fate, but he was also influenced by the audience, by the collective emotion, by the vibrancy of the moment. And this made the spectacle even more intense, because it wasn't just about strength, it was about connection, about how the gladiator communicated with the audience, how he touched something profound, how he aroused admiration. It was a journey of transformation, where the warrior ceased to be just a body and became a symbol. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because understanding how the legacy of these gladiators has spanned centuries and still influences our culture can reveal a lot about the power of memory, image, and courage experienced in public. Comment here. That makes sense to me. If this part made you see that, even in the arena, there was room for honor, conscious choices, and a connection that went far beyond the fight. What began as blood became a symbol of resistance. And this isn't just a catchphrase. It's a truth that spans centuries and continues to pulsate in modern culture. The image of the gladiator, marked by pain, courage, and dedication, has been redefined over time and today inhabits films, series, games, and even motivational speeches. It's no wonder that when someone wants to represent strength in the face of adversity, the gladiator archetype emerges. He's remembered not just as a fighter, but as someone who faced the impossible, who faced death with dignity, who transformed suffering into presence. And this transformation is what makes his legacy so powerful. Behind the scenes of pop culture, the gladiator has become a protagonist. In productions like Gladiator, for example, we don't just see combat. We see an emotional journey, a fight for justice, a search for meaning. The character of Maximus has become an icon because he carries something that goes beyond the sword. He represents silent resistance, honor in the face of corruption, the strength born of loss. And this impact is no coincidence. It is the result of a symbolic construction that began way back in the arenas of Rome and has been nurtured by centuries of admiration, reinvention, and storytelling. In games, the gladiator appears as a playable character, as a combat class, as an aesthetic reference, and even in digital environments where everything is simulated, the essence remains. the player who chooses to be a sei. Gladiator is, in some way, assuming the role of someone who fights with everything they have, even when the odds are slim. It's a choice that carries a mentality, a decision to confront, to resist, to stand out. And this shows how the archetype remains alive, adapted to new languages but still charged with meaning. In fashion, art, and advertising, the gladiator also appears, sometimes in subtle details, like a sandal inspired by Roman armor, other times in campaigns that use the image to convey strength, resilience, and impact. And this constant presence reveals something profound. The gladiator has not been forgotten. He has been absorbed, incorporated into the collective imagination as a symbol of transformation, as someone who, even in the face of pain, chooses to rise. And this choice resonates with those who watch, those who consume, and those who identify with him. The hidden truth is that the fascination with gladiators doesn't come solely from their violence. It comes from their vulnerability, from the fact that they were ordinary men, placed in extreme situations and yet still managed to inspire admiration. This duality between brutality and humanity is what makes their legacy so powerful, because it reminds us that greatness lies not in the absence of fear, but in the way we face it. And this connects with anyone who has ever felt pressured, judged, or challenged. The gladiator is a reflection of our own journey of resistance. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because understanding how the behind-the-scenes minds and energy of these warriors influence their decisions within the arena can reveal a lot about the power of presence, intention, and transformation experienced under the eyes of a crowd. Comment here. That makes sense to me. If this part made you see that the gladiator who lives in modern culture is much more than a historical figure. He is a symbol that continues to inspire decisions and mindsets to this day. Now that you know the true story of gladiators, you may have realized that behind the image of armed men fighting to the death lay a complex web of meanings, choices, and transformations. They weren't just pieces of a bloody spectacle. They were protagonists of an intense journey, marked by pain, glory, strategy, and presence. Every gesture in the arena carried an intention. Every combat revealed a mindset. Every survival was a decision that went far beyond physical strength. And this changes everything. It changes the way we see these warriors, changes the way we interpret the impact they had and still have on our culture. What's most impressive is how this narrative has endured. Even centuries later, gladiators remain alive in the collective memory, inspiring films, speeches, characters, and even attitudes. They have become archetypes of resistance, symbols of courage in the face of the impossible, references for those seeking to reinvent themselves amidst chaos. And this is no accident. The hidden truth is that the gladiator represents something we all, at some point, have felt: the need to confront, to take a stand, to transform pain into strength. And when this image is activated, it touches something deep. It reminds us that, even in extreme scenarios, it is possible to choose how to react. It is possible to sustain one's presence. It is possible to leave a mark. This reflection brings us to an important point: the impact a story can have on the way we make decisions. When we understand the behind-the-scenes story of these men's lives, we begin to realize that each choice, from their combat style to their final gesture before the emperor, was loaded with meaning. And this invites us to examine our own decisions more consciously. What are we communicating with our gestures? What kind of presence are we sustaining? What legacy are we building, even in the small, everyday battles? The gladiator's journey doesn't end in the arena. It continues in every person inspired by this strength, this dedication, this ability to face the seemingly impossible. And perhaps that's why, even after so long, we still speak of them with admiration, because they show us that true greatness isn't found in winning, it's in how you fight. It's found in the courage to expose yourself, to reinvent yourself, to stand by your own truth even when everything seems against you. And this mindset, this posture, this impact, is what transforms an ordinary man into an eternal symbol. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because understanding how gladiators dealt with the fear, anticipation, and pressure of fighting in front of a crowd can reveal a lot about the emotional underpinnings that shaped each combat, and how that connects to the challenges we face today. Comment here. I'm on this journey too. If this part made you see that the legacy of the gladiators is not just in history, it is in the way we choose to live our own battles. If you've made it this far, you've already realized that this story goes far beyond the struggles and the sand of the arena. It's about presence, about choices, about the impact a life can have when lived with courage and intention. If this message touched you in any way, please leave a like. It shows that this type of content resonates with you and helps keep the exchange we've built throughout the video alive. Write in the comments, "I'm with you until the end." It's a way to seal this conversation, to show that you were present down to the last detail, and also to inspire those who are just arriving to dive into this journey with us. And if you want to continue exploring the behind the scenes of ancient Rome, its warriors, symbols, and everything that still pulsates in our culture, subscribe to the channel here. That way, you can stay up to date on future videos and join me on this journey through stories that provoke, connect, and transform. There's a video here that complements this subject. Click and continue with me there. The journey still has a lot to reveal.